One of the most frequent questions people ask about life on the Antiques Roadshow is, have you ever broken anything valuable? The answer is just one of many things you'll find out on today's programme. Now, when did you first watch the Antiques Roadshow? If you're like me, it was as a child with Mum and Dad. In today's Priceless, we meet another young fan who became something of an expert.
The auction was during school, so I couldn't go. So I sent instructions with my dad to tell him what to bid up to, and he got them for me.
Jolly well done. I suggested to him that he should try to get some earlier ones.
I've tried to get them, but they are very expensive, I found.
They're terribly hard to get. 2 years later, he comes back with them.
They say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Eric Knowles meets a woman who redefined good taste.
I love it because it is so awful, but on the other hand, it is beautifully hideous.
And the moment every expert dreads.
One's worst nightmare on the roadshow is that you personally are going to break something.
15 to 20,000. So take great care.
Many of our experts put their passion for collecting down to experiences they had in childhood. And I've been amazed by the amount of enthusiasm shown by the younger visitors to the roadshow. But where does this early dedication come from? Our tireless researchers have delved through the archives to try and find an answer. We used to see some impressive queues at the annual Children's Roadshow, each bearing personal treasures. And don't underestimate these youngsters. They'd often got some surprisingly valuable treasures in tow.
Now, why do you like that bowl?
Because it's quite pretty, the way that the flowers come out of the bowl.
They're raised up, yes.
I remember a very small girl had a wonderful piece of French Art Nouveau glass.
Do you know who made it? It's got a name on it here, hasn't it?
But I don't know how to say it.
Well, it says G.R.G. Rousseau. He was a very famous French glassmaker in the 1920s, and he used a particularly complicated technique, which was called pâte de verre.
Pâte de verre was very expensive, and very few people did it in a big way. And as a result, a lot of pieces are very small because it was so expensive to do. And those pieces have always been very high priced. And so to see a piece at any point in a roadshow is unusual. To see a piece owned by a 5 or 6 year old child is bizarre, to say the least.
And what do you know about it?
Well, that when my great aunt went to Paris to study, she saved up all her pocket money, and that was the only thing she bought.
So she brought this back from France, and you like it because you like the flowers and the effect of it, and I do very much too.
What she did know was that it was important, she liked it, and it had been passed down through the family from a previous generation of collectors.
And she must have saved up a lot of money. I wonder how much money she had to save up. A lot of pocket money.
Just a year's worth.
A year's worth of pocket money. How much is your pocket money for a year?
I get £1 every Sunday from my dad.
£1, so you could save up £50. Well, do you think you could buy this for £50? I have to tell you, it's worth not £50, not £500, but probably £4,000 in a special sale.
One lucky girl. But it's not just children with generous aunts who get the collecting bug. Sometimes you meet a child whose dedication to their subject is truly inspiring.
I collect all Second World War things and anything to do with the 30s and 40s period.
I think children have always been great collectors. They love assembling things and they love knowledge.
All this here is to do with the air raid wardens.
Yeah. It came with lots of interesting things about the particular person.
I remember one boy who came to a children's roadshow, and what drove him was getting into history and recreating a period that he couldn't have experienced.
I know that this is a German incendiary bomb. I hope it's safe.
Yeah.
Where did you get that from?
It landed on someone's shed during the war.
Or didn't go off?
No, it didn't go off. And he was an engineer, so he took all the insides out and he drilled the two holes at the top.
Yeah.
And then he used it as a loo chain pool.
What, really?
Yeah. for the last 50 years or so.
So a very explosive pool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Having picked his subject, which in effect is the Second World War, he'd focused down very, very carefully and cleverly on the things that really brought it to life for him.
Now, what I like about your collection, apart from the fact that it's so diverse, it really takes us into the sort of social history of that period. There's some wonderful Ministry of Food leaflets here. What's in the larder? 12 ways of using up leftovers.
He was particularly involved in, I think, recording the home front, things like ration books and gas masks and the whole paraphernalia of daily life in those extraordinary circumstances.
Now, what on earth is that?
This is a baby's gas mask.
Yes.
You put the whole baby inside there.
And seal it in.
Yeah, that's right. And then you have to pump it to keep them alive.
What we learned on the Children's Roadshow was that children are so focused in what they're doing. They have a dedication, they have a knowledge, and they have a fixed approach that you don't see in adults.
I think you're very remarkable.
Thank you.
And long may you go on collecting.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So, did he take Paul's advice? 10 years on, we caught up with Mark Hughes to see what's happened to all that enthusiasm.
My collection is still all there. Since doing the Antiques Roadshow, we've done things like having a 1940s night in our community. It is important to me that my collection isn't just in a storeroom, because I remember the people that have given me each item and some things which were actually so important in people's lives that I don't want those things to be forgotten. I want those things to carry on telling those stories. Yeah, this was the gas mask that I showed Paul Atterbury on the roadshow. The horrible thought now, I've got my own son who's 6 months old. I know he'd hate this thing. He would not be happy going inside this. It's just a horrible, horrible thought that generation had to go through that fear night after night during the Battle of Britain and the Blitz. After the roadshow, I had some really kind letters, people writing in, and that was great. So thank you to all of those people.
Ceramics specialist Henry Sandon has met many such determined young collectors in his time, but even he was impressed by this enthusiast.
A very interesting collection of English royal commemoratives. What started you off on this?
Well, it was that tin. We were clearing out my grandma's flat, and I came across a bag and...
Collecting commemoratives, of course, it was very easy if you collect the fairly recent commemoratives of the last 100 years. I mean, there are masses of them about. They don't cost a lot of money. But to get the rarities, of course, costs not only money, but it costs a great deal of discovery. And this lad turned up with some quite interesting things. But you've got some terribly excitingly rare pieces, running right back to the coronation of William IV. These pieces, which is back in 1831. And then I suggested to him that he should try to get some earlier ones. One thing you haven't got is the coronation of Queen Victoria.
Yeah, I've tried to get that, but they are very expensive, I found.
They're terribly hard to get. He went off quite seriously. 2 years later, he comes back with them. I've seen you before.
I was here 2 years ago when you told me that I didn't have any Victorian coronation pieces in my collection. So I've tried to work very hard on that, and I found that piece, that one, and this one.
I thought it was marvellous. He'd taken these words to heart, and he'd sought these things out, and he came back with some incredibly fine things, and he'd even gone back to a piece from the end of the 17th century.
As I've grown older, I decided to collect older pieces, and I got this charger.
Now, that goes back several hundred years before, doesn't it? What's it, William and Mary?
Yeah.
So that's 1690,
I think it was about.
1690s or something like that. A charger like this is going to be into 4 figures back to £1,000.
Really?
Like that. I said to him, where do you get this money from?
Well, with a bit of help from my dad. He finances most of it.
I know what it's like having a son who collects as well. And, you have to put your hand in your pocket every now and then to give them a helping hand. But that's good, isn't it?
Henry should know his son John was an early collector and is now one of Britain's and the Antiques Roadshow's leading ceramics experts. But I'm intrigued to know what first gave our specialists their particular passion for antiques. In the case of Hilary Kay, it wasn't her dad, but her grandfather who sowed those early seeds.
This is a fairly standard Victorian microscope made by R&J Beck, brass. Nothing particularly remarkable about it. I mean, it's a good quality one. It's a binocular microscope. You've got lenses there, one for each eye. But the thing about it which is special for me is that it was my grandfather's microscope. He bought it at an auction, and it was the object really that got me interested in the strange mechanical antiques that's been my career for the last 30-odd years. So it's very special. What I love about the microscope is not perhaps what you'd expect, in that looking through it was an added extra. What I loved about it was the object itself. I love the look of it. And I come from a line of chartered engineers. My grandfather was a chartered engineer, my dad was a chartered engineer. So I suppose I had it in the genes, and I loved the way it works. You know, it's such a piece of precision engineering. And I suppose it's quite handy that that's what appealed to me. Otherwise, I might be in the microbiology department of some institution otherwise. But it was the mechanics that I loved.
Hilary, I'm sure your granddad would be proud to see where that interest has led you. And developing an expert eye doesn't happen overnight. It takes years of practice. And to see that expertise in action, we gave 3 of our specialists a series of challenges. With a limited budget, they were asked to snap up a handful of bargain buys. Let's meet the experts under pressure to find the bargains. We've chosen 3 with strong ideas about what's stylish when it comes to furniture. And their enthusiasm should reveal big differences. First up, the ultra-resourceful Catherine Higgins, who's hoping she can breathe new life into something second-hand and bag herself a bargain. Next, Stephen Moore, who's not afraid to make bold style statements by mixing and matching designs. And Mark Hill likes nothing better than digging out forgotten items from the post-war era. Their challenge is to spot a good investment for no more than £100. And along the way, they'll share some tips for finding stylish pieces of furniture others may overlook.
I'm here at the Shepton Mallet Flea Market in Somerset to try and find a piece of furniture for under £100. This is not a fine quality antiques fair, thank goodness. I love these sorts of fairs. So it can be a little bit hit and miss, particularly in terms of quality and also the choice. Furniture's quite large, many dealers don't tend to bring it to a fair like this. But it's really a case of getting out there, getting round and seeing what's here.
A keen judge of what's hot and what's not, Mark's on the prowl. And he hones in on a perfect accompaniment to an afternoon tea party.
I think this is a fantastic piece. It's a nice small piece of furniture and it's multifunctional. You could use it for many different things. It's Edwardian, but it's sort of inspired by Georgian, if you like, and it's a nice, elegant piece. But what I really see with this as well, at the moment there's a fashion for giving old-fashioned tea parties with cupcakes, and I think this would look absolutely smashing as the centrepiece to serve your cupcakes from. It's priced at £180, and the dealer and I have politely negotiated it down to £120. But with my budget of £100, it's still too expensive. And with this little bit of damage here, it would need repairing. So I think I'm going to have to leave it.
While Mark's contemplating his strategy, Stephen Moore's in hot pursuit of his own pieces.
I've chosen today to come to the Lincolnshire Antiques and Home Show because it's a great opportunity. We've got over 3,000 dealers from across Europe, so let's go and see what we can find.
Stephen says it's worth braving bad weather at fairs because with fewer buyers, sellers may be happier to strike a deal.
These are really smart. It's frightening to think that, stuff from the 1970s when I was growing up is now becoming fashionable and collectible, but it is. It's £25. That one's £20. And I think that's a bargain. That could be one for our shopping list.
It's not easy finding a piece of furniture for £100 these days, so I've chosen this house clearance company which specialises in antique, modern and vintage items. It's a great place if you've got a little bit of vision.
As well as second-hand and charity shops, Catherine recommends exploring recycling websites for unwanted furniture being given away.
When you're thinking about buying furniture, it's a really good idea to consider the condition of the item that you're buying. This Edwardian wardrobe is a great piece. It's got some wonderful banded decoration here, which isn't lifting, and normally that could lift if it had had some wear and tear. So that's a good point. But what is missing here is the handle and the lock that would have originally had. And also it's got some rather unusual lucite handles that are on the bottom drawer. So those two factors alone will add to the cost of the repair of the item, and you've got to factor that in when you buy it. Price tag is £75 on this, but you'll have to pay another £75 to repair those two pieces alone. But even so, it still represents tremendously good value.
Now, whilst I love those coffee tables, I'm glad I didn't buy them because I think I found something even better. I think these chairs are really smart. They're probably French, late 50s, early 60s, with their original material, great combination of the chrome and the cloth. I think they're great. They've got an individual look to them. One thing we have to check is, are they comfortable? Because often chairs that look this good are not that comfortable. So let's have a quick sit on them. And yeah, these are pretty comfortable. And I just noticed here the price. They're £35 each. That to me is a great steal, but let's see if we can steal a little bit more. You select them for £60, I'm going to take them.
The best thing about these stylish chairs? There's no refurbishment required. A bit of a clean and they're good to go. Mark's narrowed down his search. He thinks furniture now being thrown away by his parents' generation could offer retro chic credibility.
This is a piece of furniture made in England by a company called G-Plan. The very best pieces were designed by a man called Ib Kofod Larsen, and his signature appears on the label underneath. Unfortunately, it isn't there on this one, but there's the identifying label that tells us it's G-Plan. It's solid teak, and I love these very nicely curving legs, and then this cross plank here. I'm not so fond of this modern varnish that I think's been applied over the top of it. And if I were to buy this, particularly as there's a bit of damage down here, I would probably give it a soft rub back and then rub in some teak oil, just to bring the richness of the wood back out. But for £20, it's an absolute steal. This will look great for really nothing like you'd pay on the high street for a more contemporary example. So this is going to be my choice for a piece of furniture for under £100, with plenty of spare change left.
Catherine's found something which she reckons could be great value for under £100.
Now this is a rather unattractive looking sofa, but has tremendous potential to be something better than it is now. It's very much in the style of a Howard armchair or even a Howard sofa. It's got the sprung back, the feather cushions, which are really long, so you get a very nice, comfortable seat position. You've got to visualise what it could be. The upholstery is pretty filthy, and it either needs a clean, or you could bring it back to life with some very, very trendy fabric. I'm going to give you an example of how it can be made over. Give it a new lease of life. Look at that. Isn't that spectacular? It's tagged at £75. It's a reasonably straightforward project to reupholster. Probably needs about 16 metres of fabric or so for it. And you could end up with something that is far, far cheaper than the equivalent on the high street. So it represents a tremendously good buy, and it's jolly comfortable too.
All three are delighted with their buys. Stephen managed to bag a pair of stylish and functional late 20th century chairs, and well within budget. Mark's G-Plan coffee table had the smallest price tag, and its 60s style means it has real cool appeal. Catherine spent the most, but she reckons that with an overhaul, her shabby sofa could represent the best long-term value for money. I have to say, Catherine's choice had the edge for me. That sofa will look $1 million when she's worked her magic. Sadly, the same can't be said for every object brought into the Antiques Roadshow. People are generally careful, but accidents will happen.
Just occasionally, an owner will tell you that they're treating an object in a particular way or displaying it somewhere. And you have to work out whether they're pulling your leg.
Do you put all of your pottery figures in the dishwasher?
Well, when they need really washing, they come out very nice.
You are teasing me about the dishwasher, aren't you?
No, really.
Right, okay.
And also the other thing you mustn't do is you shouldn't hang it up on a wire.
Well, we've had it hanging up on a wire for 50 years.
This is the same wire?
Yes.
The R&B was, when the wire rusts through, you would be a rather expensive and resounding crash.
So it says, please treat this book with care when you look through it. Thank you. So who put this in here?
That was me. I was a primary school teacher, and this book was on display as a resource.
Well, I have to say, you shouldn't stick it in, a note in like this. It stains the book, and it really isn't very good for it.
Kindly words of advice are all very well, but for some unfortunate objects, it's just too late.
Who damaged it?
It was my husband's grandma's.
Yeah.
And she had a pair and she dropped them both, I think. And
Someone will bring along a favourite object, and we have to break the news to them that if it's broken, you can take the perfect value down to maybe a third of the original perfect value.
So the pair, when perfect, before your granny started going on the rampage, would have been worth somewhere between £5,000 and £8,000. The one that's bust is worth nothing. The one that you've got left now, which on its own perfect would have been worth maybe £2,000 to £3,000, is now worth maybe, if you get it nicely repaired, £300-400.
That's nice.
Oh, I'm glad you can look at it on the bright side.
But I think in this particular instance, she took it very well. Ceramics being what they are, they're always going to get chipped or damaged or cracked. We see a lot of damage. In fact, quite a lot of the damage is probably done in the queue before it gets to us.
Things like this suddenly proliferate.
Right.
Oh dear.
Very occasionally on the roadshow, there'll be a crash.
Bought these through postal auctions today.
Right.
You certainly have to pay something in the region of £2,000-3,000
Really?
for the collection. Oh yes.
I'm gobsmacked.
Thanks very much.
And all of a sudden, there was this great smash from behind us, and the room went totally silent. And we looked, and oh my goodness, what must have happened?
What happened? It just fell out my hand. Fell out of my hand.
What can you say, you know? The people are often desperately concerned because it belonged to Auntie Mabel, and she said that it was worth a lot of money.
I have to tell you, you haven't ruined anything of any great merit. It was worth, before you put paid to it, about £10 or £15. So, not quite the disaster it might have been, but sorry it happened.
But sometimes it's not quite so easy to look on the bright side.
One very sad incident comes to mind, which went back to the Victoria Bards in Manchester, when this fantastic telescope came in.
But just look at the way that it's constructed. First of all, you've got this wonderful mahogany tube here, supported on these very substantial brass columns.
And we talked about it, the owner and I, and it got to the point of me looking down the barrel to have a look at the big lens at the bottom.
Let's have a look. Oh dear.
I saw that the big reflecting lens was broken. It was at that point that the owner told me this dreadful story, that it was a very recent breakage.
When I was getting it ready to come, I took the dew cap off and noticed that the mirror down in the bottom was tarnished, so I thought, well, it would be better if it were cleaned. So I undid the screws at the end, took the end off, got the cleaning kit, and I had the mirror in my... Well, I had the whole of the end comes off, you see, and it's very heavy. And suddenly, it was almost as in slow motion. You know the way on the films you see everything happening in dreadful... This mirror was on its way down onto our conservatory floor.
Oh, conservatory floor,
with tiles, totally unforgiving. It hit the floor absolutely flat. There's still a ring on the tiles where it sort of scuffed the tiles, and it exploded into
smithereens.
My heart just went out to him. I mean, what a thing to have happened to him.
It is dreadful that the original mirror has gone. You can get a new mirror.
Yes, I'm in process of just ordering a new one.
Fantastic.
And as far as the owner was concerned, it wasn't the end of the world. It was going to be fit for purpose again, and, life goes on. One's worst nightmare on the roadshow is that you personally are going to break something.
Hello.
I've been lucky so far, but there was a fabulous breakage, a spectacular spectacular breakage, which David Battie was responsible for.
Oh, my goodness. You haven't got a pair of these, have you?
Yeah.
Really?
I was working from a plinth. The girl came in the queue, unpacked these things. I put one down on the plinth, and I could actually hear the public who were all round going, "Oh, you put that bit near, a bit near the edge."
They are very valuable indeed. Do you want to know how much?
Yeah.
I think these would probably fetch between £15,000 and £20,000. They're quite rare. 15 to 20,000. So take great care.
There was one old lady who burst into tears thinking I'd ruined this poor child's livelihood, and her son came across to punch me and had to be restrained by the crew.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was a fix. This lady wrote to Jim will fix it, and we fixed it for her. These are in fact... These were in fact bought from a chain store for very little money indeed, so don't worry about it.
Not easy.
David, 1,000 thanks for doing that for us.
Then we went into the Jim will fix it studio months later, and I awarded her badge and gave her a 200-year-old plate as a souvenir.
Let me show it to the ladies and gentlemen. 200 years old.
Don't break it.
Don't break it, as it happens.
It was great.
Jim will fix it. Those were the days. And things do occasionally get broken on the Antiques Roadshow, but considering how many items we've dealt with over the years, they're very few and far between. But now and again on the programme, you see something you might actually want to break. Eric Knowles recalls one visitor who had a love-hate relationship with a memorable item.
Because this is by a firm called Moore Brothers.
Right.
It's somewhere between about 1888 and 1905.
That particular object was a bit of a favourite of mine because I do have an affection for Victoriana. It's often a case of design losing its way, and I think that was true of that Moore's bone china centrepiece.
Now, what I want to know is, would you like any more of them? Because I don't want to get too personal, it's not everybody's taste.
You're quite right, because in fact, I love it because it is so awful, but on the other hand, it is beautifully hideous, if you know what I mean. And I didn't buy it.
Yeah.
It was given to me by a boyfriend.
It just tickled me, you know, the idea of somebody showing their feelings and their affection by giving the girlfriend a bone china centrepiece. I have to say, she must have been a very understanding type of girlfriend.
Some say it with chocolates, some say it with flowers, but you're the first lady I've ever met whose boyfriend said it with a Moore Brothers centrepiece.
Makes me wonder what that man might be doing today when it comes to showing his affections. He's probably buying his wife a Swiss Army knife.
Whoever said romance was dead? Well, that's just about it for today. Join us again next time for some more classic finds on Priceless Antiques Roadshow.
And Fiona Bruce highlights the best bits from the past 30 years of the Priceless Antiques Roadshow on this BBC DVD. Coming up, The Culture Show catches up with designer turned film director Tom Ford next on BBC Two.